What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so we have about a month before Dark Knight's Metal 5 comes out, and in truth, I'd actually kind of planned on holding Hawkman Found until halfway through January, and then releasing it and then giving ourselves about another 2 weeks before we could do Dark Knight's Metal number 5. But you guys have been screaming for this, so I'll give it to you. Just be aware, there's no comics for Dark Knight's Metal coming out for a month. Kind of how it goes, so. And it's kind of weird. I mean, there's nothing coming out. I mean, there's no tie-ins, no nothing. For the whole month of January, there's nothing but there's like no Dark Knight's Metal of any kind being released. So it's gonna be kind of a lull, but you know, I guess that's what you guys wanted because you guys want this story now. So Hawkman Found is really, really cool. This is like a very Twilight Zone-esque episode. Fun fact, so before the ball dropped on New Year's Eve last night, we were watching the first 2 episodes of Twilight Zone because it's on Netflix. Myself and Benny were just kind of killing time, and we fired up the first 2 episodes. One of the guys who was with us, Mark, has never seen the Twilight Zone, and we were like, dude, that's crazy. The entire modern genre of like sci-fi thrillers with surprise endings was built on the shoulders of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone. Like, it's one of the best shows ever in the history of television. So it just kind of astounded me, and we felt like giving him a hard time. But this is very Twilight Zone-esque in terms of how this works, because initially it just kind of picks up with Hawkman falling from the sky. Now remember, Hawkman was taken by Barbados, but we didn't really know what happened to him. All we knew was that there was basically this journal of Hawkman kind of going around, you know, and doing all these different things where he was trying to track down the nature of nth metal. Because remember, for years and years and years in DC Comics, no one ever knew what nth metal was about. All they knew, it was just like this metal that existed and it had some properties to it, and different people used it for different purposes. Hawkman's mace was made of nth metal. You had Deathstroke who had nth metal armor, and that was really about it. It's not really until Dark Knight's Metal came along that suddenly there was this huge expansion for what nth metal means and what it's about, what it's capable of, and all that kind of stuff. This story is designed to kind of provide the back end to DC, which we never saw. That it was basically somewhere along the line after Hawkman had basically discovered nth metal and in turn was kind of thrown into this scenario where he was going to die and be reborn really until the end of time. Then his curiosity peaked. His question was, what is it about nth metal that puts me in this situation that I'm going to die and be reborn? That no matter who kills me or how many times I die, I'll always come back in a different body and live a new life. Dark Knight's Metal is designed to explore that whole thing. And so really with Hawkman going through and trying to figure out what's going on, with regards to his first encounter with Barbados, defeating Barbados, different things like that, this led into him basically discovering that nth metal, you know, really originates from the Dark Multiverse. And so in the Dark Knight's Metal stories, you know, issues 1 and 2 and so on, he'd walked through the portal and we never found out what happened to him. This is designed to provide that back end to filler. I mean, it's very much a filler story. I mean, Batman Lost was a filler story. It's not really designed to move the plot forward so much as it's designed to say, here's just a story about what happened with one of the characters. And so initially with Hawkman just kind of falling from the sky, he really throws it in as a dream of sorts, simply saying like, I have this dream that I'm a warrior, you know, I'm a Hawkman, you know, and I'm flying through the sky and I'm fighting for what's right. And then I fall to the ground from the sky. Every single time he has this dream, he wakes up right before he hits the ground. And it's super cool because what this does is it kind of shows us what happens in this interim period between the time when he hits the ground and the time when he takes to the sky again. He's basically among a multitude of people who have all been taken captive. Now, the initial indication here is that Hawkman is not the only person to have ever been taken by Barbados, that there are a litany of people from all throughout different points in time who have been taken and thrown into the Dark Multiverse. And all of them exist as prisoners of sorts. Now, each and every single day, these jailers, more or less, these Hawk people effectively show up. They grab some prisoner and they whisk off with them. And the goal of Hawkman is to capture one of them and finally make it to their ship, finally find a way to bring these guys down and essentially allow all these individuals who are held captive to go free. And it's cool because this follows perfectly in line with the nature of his character. Remember, you know, because of the fact that Hawkman will die by whatever manner and whatever means. He'll die of old age or he'll die in combat or something along those lines, and his essence will be reborn in a new body. He's fought in countless battles. He's one of the fiercest warriors out there in DC Comics. That's why if you go and you read something like Injustice, for example, Hawkman kept coming back. He was just like this fierce, battle-hardened guy who would keep facing off against Superman and Injustice. When DC released those line of stories, they grabbed Hawkman as he existed in the mainline DC set of stories and rolled the character over. So you didn't really see any major differentiation in the nature of how he was written. He was very much the same way. And so with this whole scenario, things play out exactly as we would expect them to. He's able to subdue one of these guys. You know, he initially tries to defeat him. He can't really take the wings and use them for his own ends. So he literally just climbs up the side of a mountain and finally makes his way onto the ship itself. himself. And again, it's this dream that he has. It keeps recurring. He always ends up falling. But in his mind, it's this scenario, not this time. And that's why it's so cool, because what this indicates is that that's his biggest fear, that he'll always fall down. He always imagines himself going into this ship or trying to gain access to this ship, but ultimately end up being beaten. So it's one of these things where it's kind of conquering his own fears, conquering his own nightmares, and then ultimately, being successful and freeing his people. And so having finally stowed aboard this ship, or, finally gained access, is basically all these weapons that belong to all these people, all these maces, different things like that, and even the armor of himself. And so that's why he basically he dons his Hawkman suit, he becomes the hero we're most familiar with, and he begins this campaign to basically destroy these guys. Now, of course, this leads into a direct conflict with kind of like the chief of the Hawkmen, so to speak, kind of like their leader, or at the very least, one of the guys who were in charge, military-wise. But it is interesting because it's essentially the same idea that he's facing off against this guy. He's defeating this guy. He does what he always does, destroys this enemy, destroys all these different Hawkmen, all these different soldiers that are out there, so on and so forth. It's always the same thing. It's him defeating the bad guy, the nature of his character. That's why it's cool, and that's why it's interesting, because it feeds into how we always saw Hawkman with regards to DC Comics. And so finally defeating this guy, finally getting aboard this ship, he sails up to the sky. He dons his armor, says, look, we are free now, sails up into the sky, and starts crashing back down to the ground again. And that's when the realism of the situation begins to come into sharp relief. It's the repeating dream. It never ends. He never escapes from it. This dream that he has where he takes into the sky and he manages to lose his wings and come crashing to the ground, that's how it always happens. He's stuck in an endless perpetual loop. So long as he's confined to this role of being the, guard of the World Forge, like we saw in Dark Knight's Metal 4, Hawkman will always have the dream that he'll take to the sky to defeat these people who are capturing, quote unquote, the individuals who are being held captive. He'll always defeat them, and he'll always gain his freedom, and he'll always crash back down to the surface again. It will always end that way. None of it's real. It's all a dream. No one else is being held captive by Barbados, at least not that we know of. It's basically a way to keep his mind in stasis. It's the exact same thing that happened to like Batman. It's the exact same thing that happened to Superman before he was able to engineer his escape. It's the exact same thing that goes on with these characters time and time again. They're held captive and they're made to believe they have a chance at success. And that's why the actions and the abilities of Barbados work here, because it's essentially breaking a person down. At the very least, it keeps them preoccupied and they're totally unaware to the realism of the situation. But it basically keeps them occupied. It keeps them kind of in stasis. In their mind, they're living a Matrix-like mindset. Everything they experience is real. Everything they experience is true, and it can break them psychologically. All the while, they're off doing something according to whatever it is Barbados wants them to do. And that's why it's interesting. That's why it's so intriguing, because what this really does is it hints at the idea that because of the fact that, Hawkman is the guard of the World Forge, meaning he's basically the person that's designed to eliminate any threat that would show up and try to stop the actions of Barbados from basically conquering the entirety of the positive multiverse while he's outside of the dark multiverse. It really throws in this idea that Hawkman, as he exists now, is the most powerful tool that Barbados has at his disposal, the most powerful being he has available. I mean, after all, why would you give the keys to the house to somebody who couldn't protect it? But again, it's interesting. It is pretty intriguing. It's not huge. There's not a whole lot to go on here. It's a pretty interesting story, more or less just kind of one of those filler stories you just sort of breeze through and call it a day. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.